The sound of clinking golf clubs and disappointed sighs drifted through the French doors of my parents' country club-style patio. I was inside, supposedly helping Mom prepare appetizers for Dad's monthly golf buddies gathering, but really just trying to stay invisible. At 26, I'd mastered the art of being present but unnoticed at family events. "Another beer, Kevin?" Dad's voice boomed across the patio, followed by the familiar ritual of masculine laughter and business talk that excluded me entirely. "I'm Alex Morrison," though my family had taken to introducing me as our youngest, with that particular tone that suggested I came with an expiration date on my potential. 3 years ago, I dropped out of Stanford during my junior year to pursue what Dad called computer nonsense. What I'd actually been building was something that would soon reshape entire industries, but they'd never bothered to ask for details. "How's business, Richard?" Kevin Patterson asked. He owned the largest construction company in the state and never missed a chance to remind everyone. "Excellent, excellent," Dad replied, his real estate empire still thriving despite his complete inability to understand anything digital. "Just closed on 3 more commercial properties downtown. And the kids?" This from Bob Chin, whose pharmaceutical company had made him wealthy enough to afford casual condescension. "How's the family?" Through the window, I watched Dad's expression shift into what I'd learned to recognize as his disappointment management face. "Well, you know, David's doing phenomenally at the law firm. Just made junior partner at 32. And Sarah's medical practice is expanding. She's opening a second location in the spring." The pride in his voice when discussing my older siblings was unmistakable. David, the perfect son who'd followed Dad into business-adjacent success. Sarah, the brilliant daughter who'd exceeded even their ambitious expectations. "And Alex?" Kevin prompted, probably remembering me from previous gatherings where I'd been trotted out as the family's cautionary tale. Dad sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 3 years' worth of accumulated disappointment. "College dropout working retail. Such a disappointment." I gripped the serving tray tighter. That's what they thought I did. Because when they'd asked about my job, I'd mentioned working at the Apple store, and they'd stopped listening before I could explain that I was there conducting market research for my company's latest product launch. "Kids these days," Bob chimed in. "No work ethic. They think success should just fall into their laps." "Different generation," Kevin agreed. "They don't understand that real wealth comes from real work." Real work. I almost laughed. If they only knew about the 18-hour days I'd been pulling for the past 3 years, the all-nighters spent coding, the endless meetings with venture capitalists who initially dismissed me as just another college kid with an app idea. Mom appeared beside me, adjusting the cheese arrangement with nervous precision. "Maybe you should go upstairs, honey," she whispered. "They get a bit vocal when they've been drinking." I was about to take her advice when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, grateful for any excuse to escape the patio. I opened the front door to find a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, holding a leather portfolio and looking slightly nervous. "Hi, I'm Jessica Laurent from Forbes magazine," she said, extending her hand. "I'm here for the exclusive interview with America's youngest self-made billionaire, Alex Morrison." The serving tray slipped from my hands, clattering against the marble foyer floor. For a moment neither of us moved. That's me," I managed. "Wonderful." Jessica smiled. "I have to say I'm excited about this piece. Your story is exactly the kind of entrepreneurial success our readers love. From college dropout to tech billionaire in 3 years. It's remarkable." Behind me, I heard the conversation on the patio continue, unaware that their definition of my life was about to be completely shattered. "Should we do the interview here?" Jessica asked, looking around the impressive foyer. "This is perfect for photos. Really captures the success story. Young entrepreneur in the family home that launched their empire." I almost corrected her about whose empire had actually launched from this house, but stopped myself. There would be time for that conversation later. "Actually," I said, "let's start on the patio. I think my family would enjoy meeting you." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. Family interviews are always wonderful. They add such personal depth to the business story. I led her through the house toward the French doors, my heart pounding. 3 years of hiding in plain sight were about to end in the most spectacular way possible. "Just through here," I said, pushing open the doors. The conversation on the patio stopped abruptly. Dad looked up from his beer. Kevin paused mid-sentence about market trends, and Bob's golf story died on his lips. Dad, I said calmly, I'd like you to meet Jessica Laurent from Forbes magazine. She's here for an interview. Dad's face lit up with confusion and curiosity. Forbes? Well, that's wonderful. Are you doing a piece on the real estate market? I'd be happy to share some insights. Jessica looked between us, equally confused. Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm here to interview Alex about building Quantum Leap Technologies into a billion-dollar company. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's beer bottle stopped halfway to his lips. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Bob simply stared. Billion-dollar company? Dad repeated slowly. Yes, Jessica said, pulling out her notes. Alex is being featured as our cover story. The dropout who disrupted everything. How Alex Morrison built the future of quantum computing. I watched the blood drain from Dad's face as Jessica continued. The company valuation just hit $1.2 billion after the Series C funding round last month. It's quite a story. Dropping out of Stanford to build quantum computing solutions that are revolutionizing everything from financial modeling to drug discovery. Kevin found his voice first. Quantum computing? Alex's company developed the first commercially viable quantum processors for consumer applications, Jessica explained enthusiastically. Major tech companies are licensing the technology. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they're all implementing Quantum Leap's innovations. Bob leaned forward. How much did you say the company is worth? $1.2 billion, Jessica repeated. Though Alex's personal stake is actually higher now after the recent acquisition offers. We're estimating personal net worth at around $800 million. Dad set down his beer with shaking hands. $800 million? I finally spoke. Actually, it's closer to $950 million as of yesterday. The pharmaceutical licensing deals pushed it higher than expected. The look on his face was something I'd never seen before. Not disappointment, not pride, but complete bewilderment, as if his understanding of reality had just been fundamentally challenged. But you work retail, he said weakly. I do market research at Apple, I corrected. For Quantum Leap. We're developing consumer applications for quantum computing. Part of my job is understanding how people interact with current technology so we can design better interfaces. Jessica was scribbling notes furiously. This is perfect. The family reaction is exactly what our readers want to see. The disconnect between perception and reality in entrepreneurial success stories. Kevin cleared his throat. So when you said you were working on computer stuff, I was building the foundational algorithms for quantum error correction, I replied. The technology that made commercial quantum computing possible. Bob's pharmaceutical empire suddenly seemed much smaller. And the company you mentioned. Quantum Leap Technologies. We've revolutionized drug discovery timelines. What used to take pharmaceutical companies years of molecular modeling now takes weeks. We've got licensing agreements with 12 major pharma companies. I watched Bob's face as he realized that my computer nonsense was directly transforming his industry. This is incredible, Jessica said. Can we set up for the formal interview? I'd love to get some family photos too. The support system behind the success story. Support system. I looked at Dad, who hadn't said a word since learning about my net worth. Actually, I said, let's start with some background. Dad, why don't you tell Jessica about how supportive the family has been of my entrepreneurial journey? The trap was elegant and cruel. Jessica waited expectantly, pen poised. Dad's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed. We've always believed in Alex's potential. That's wonderful, Jessica beamed. And what was your reaction when Alex first told you about the quantum computing company? Another pause. Longer this time. We were excited about the possibilities, Dad finally managed. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Perhaps you could share some specific memories? Jessica pressed. Our readers love hearing about those family moments when you knew something special was happening. Kevin and Bob exchanged glances, suddenly understanding that they were witnessing more than just a magazine interview. Well, Dad stammered, there was the time when Alex explained the technical details and we were just amazed by the innovation. Except there hadn't been such a time. Because every time I tried to explain what I was building, I'd been dismissed with variations of, "That's nice, honey," or, "When are you going back to school?" And financially, Jessica continued, I imagine the family investment in the early stages was crucial for getting started. The question hung in the air like a sword. Because while Dad had occasionally given me grocery money with the air of someone supporting a charity case, the family had invested exactly $0 in my company. The initial funding came from venture capital, I said, rescuing him from having to lie outright. Though the family has been supportive in other ways. Of course, Jessica nodded. Emotional support is often more valuable than financial backing. He turned to Dad. What advice did you give Alex during those early, challenging startup days? I watched him struggle with the question, probably trying to remember if he'd ever given me any advice beyond, get a real job, and stop wasting time with computers. I always told Alex to follow their passion, he said finally. Even when others might have been skeptical about a college dropout starting a tech company? Jessica prompted. Especially then, Dad replied, his voice gaining confidence as he rewrote history in real time. I've always believed that conventional paths aren't for everyone. It was impressive, really. 3 years of disappointment and dismissal being transformed into supportive wisdom before my eyes. That's beautiful, Jessica said. And now, with the company valued at over $1 billion, you must be incredibly proud. Beyond proud, Dad said, and for the first time that part sounded genuine. Though honestly, we always knew Alex was special. Kevin and Bob nodded along, probably rewriting their own memories of every dismissive comment they'd made about my computer phase. Well, Jessica said, closing her notebook, this has been wonderful background. Should we move to the formal interview now? I'd love to get Alex's perspective on the journey from college dropout to billionaire entrepreneur. Actually, I said, let's do it right here. With Dad and his friends present. I think they'd enjoy hearing the real story. Jessica loved the idea. She set up her recording equipment while I helped Mom bring out more chairs. The men sat uncomfortably, probably realizing that their casual afternoon was about to become something much more significant. So, Alex, Jessica began formally, take us back to the beginning. What made you decide to drop out of Stanford to start a tech company? I looked directly at Dad as I answered. I realized that traditional education wasn't going to teach me what I needed to know to build the future. I had ideas that couldn't wait for a graduation ceremony. And your family's reaction? They thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life, I said honestly. There was a lot of disappointment, a lot of concern that I was throwing away my potential. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But that motivated you? Jessica asked. In a way. It taught me that sometimes you have to believe in your vision even when the people closest to you can't see it. Sometimes especially then. I spent the next hour detailing the real story. The 18-hour coding sessions in my tiny apartment. The 57 rejection meetings with investors who thought quantum computing was science fiction. The breakthrough moment when we achieved stable quantum coherence at room temperature. The first licensing deal that validated everything I'd been working toward. Through it all, Dad and his friends sat in stunned silence, learning about my life for the first time. The pharmaceutical applications have been particularly exciting, I continued. We're currently working with companies to reduce drug discovery timelines from years to months. The potential impact on cancer research, rare diseases, personalized medicine, it's staggering. Bob leaned forward. What kind of companies? I named 3 of his biggest competitors, watching his face as he realized they were already implementing technology his company didn't even know existed. And the financial success? Jessica asked. Forbes estimates your personal net worth at nearly $1 billion. How does that feel at 26? I glanced at Dad, whose beer had long since gone warm and forgotten. Honestly, feels like validation. For 3 years I've been called a dropout, a disappointment, someone wasting their potential. Now I employ 847 people, we're revolutionizing multiple industries, and we're just getting started. What's next for Quantum Leap Technologies? We're announcing a major expansion next month. Quantum-powered artificial intelligence that will make current AI systems look like pocket calculators. We're also launching a consumer division, quantum computing power in devices people can actually buy and use. Jessica's eyes lit up. Can you give us any hints about the consumer applications? I smiled. Let's just say that the smartphone revolution was the first wave. Quantum computing will be the tsunami. After Jessica finished the interview and left with promises of a cover story release next month, an uncomfortable silence settled over the patio. Kevin and Bob made polite excuses and left quickly, probably to Google everything I'd just told them. Dad and I sat alone as the sun set behind his perfectly manicured golf course view. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "You owe me several," I replied, but without malice. "I should have asked. Should have listened. Should have tried to understand what you were building instead of just seeing what you weren't doing." I nodded. "Yeah. You should have." The disappointment comment. To my friends. "That was honest," I finished. "That was honest. You were disappointed in me." "I know that." He looked at his hands. "I was disappointed in my understanding of success. I thought it looked like law degrees and medical practices and real estate portfolios. I never imagined it could look like this." "Like what?" "Like my kid building something I can't even comprehend, something that's going to change the world." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and regret. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you get to tell your golf buddies that your disappointment of a son is worth nearly $1 billion, I said. "Though I suspect they'll Google me long before next month's gathering." "And us? Our relationship?" I considered the question. 3 years of dismissal and disappointment weren't erased by one afternoon of revelation. But they weren't permanent either. "We figure it out," I said. "But Dad, next time I tell you I'm working on something important, maybe ask a few more questions before you write it off." He nodded. "Next time I'll listen better." "Good," I said, standing up. "Because Quantum Leap is just the beginning. And I'd rather have my family understand what I'm building than have them read about it in Forbes." The next morning my phone exploded with calls. Word had spread quickly through Dad's social circle, and suddenly everyone wanted to reconnect with the family dropout who'd become a billionaire. But more importantly, David called. My perfect older brother, the junior partner, the golden child. "Alex," he said, "I owe you an apology." "We all do." "You don't owe me anything," I replied. "But thank you." "Mom said Forbes is doing a cover story? Next month's issue. Can I ask you about your company?" Really ask and really listen to the answer. For the first time in 3 years, I heard genuine curiosity in a family member's voice. Not pity, not dismissal, but actual interest in what I'd built. "I'd like that," I said. Sarah called an hour later with the same request. Then Mom, then even Dad again, this time with specific questions about quantum computing applications in real estate. The Forbes article came out 3 weeks later. The Dropout Who Disrupted Everything featured a full-page photo of me in my parents' foyer, looking every inch the young billionaire entrepreneur I'd become. The story detailed my journey from college dropout to tech innovator, complete with quotes from family members about their unwavering support. I didn't correct the narrative. Let them have their version where they'd always believed in me. The truth was more complicated anyway. What mattered was the future. Quantum Leap's consumer division launched 6 months later to unprecedented demand. Our quantum-powered smartphones made headlines worldwide. The pharmaceutical partnerships accelerated drug discoveries at rates that seemed impossible just years before. And my family? They learned to ask better questions. Dad started reading tech journals, trying to understand the world I was building. Sarah explored applications of quantum computing in medical diagnostics. David investigated legal frameworks for emerging technologies. They never became tech experts, but they became curious. They became interested. They became supportive in ways that mattered. The family gatherings changed too. Instead of golf stories and real estate boasts, conversations included questions about quantum algorithms and silicon innovation. Instead of pitying looks when I talked about my work, I got engaged listening and thoughtful follow-up questions. 1 year after the Forbes article, Dad hosted another golf gathering. This time when Kevin asked about the kids, Dad's voice carried a different kind of pride. "Alex just announced a partnership with NASA for quantum computing applications in space exploration," he said. "The company's now valued at $3.2 billion. "And you saw this coming?" Bob asked, clearly impressed. Dad paused, and for a moment I thought he might tell the truth about those years of disappointment and dismissal. "Dad," he smiled. "Let's just say Alex taught us all something important about not judging potential by conventional standards." It wasn't quite the truth, but it was growth. And sometimes growth matters more than being right about the past. As I listened from the kitchen, preparing to join them this time as an equal rather than a disappointment, I reflected on the journey from dropout to billionaire. The money was nice, the success was validating, but the real victory was simpler. I'd built something extraordinary while they thought I was failing. I'd proven that their definition of success was too narrow, their understanding of potential too limited. I'd shown them that sometimes the biggest disappointments become the biggest surprises. And now finally, when they introduced me to people, it wasn't as our youngest with that apologetic tone. It was as Alex, our son who's changing the world. Some victories are worth waiting for.